Today's guest on the Winning Teams podcast is Renie Cavallari. Now, Renie is a source of energy that is just unbelievable. She has a strong background in the corporate world, but set up her own kind of research into, team performance, individual performance going back a number of years, and has been running her own coaching business where she focuses on team performance also for quite a number of years. She is the author of a number of books, but the book that we focus on is a topic that I'm fascinated by. The book is called HeadTrash. The subline is the leading killer of human potential. And we go into, understanding the voice that's in our head, the conversation that we have in our head, what are the things that we actually need to do. And she really does, through the research that she has done, she's identified that the differentiator between a mediocre performer and a high performer is mindset. And she validates that. And there's so much in there. There's tips, things that you can do, strategies to actually stop doing that, because we all know that, listening to that negative inner voice inside our head is probably the biggest impediment to all of us achieving what we are capable of. So I really encourage you to listen to this. She's got, Renie has just got fantastic energy, great fun, great message, and is, absolute fountain of information. So please sit back and enjoy the very interesting and fascinating and lively Renie Cavallari. Renie, thank you so much indeed for joining us today on the Winning Teams podcast. It's a real honor to have you here.
Thank you so much, John. It's wonderful to be here.
So just a little bit of background. You're the founder of the RCI Institute, which is all about awakening human potential. And it's kind of pretty much a kind of research and learning lab. You also founded Aspire, which focuses on optimizing team performance. So you're very much in the same space as I am. You're the author of a number of books, but the one that I want to focus on is your latest one, which is called HeadTrash, which I love the name. The subtitle of that is The Leading Killer of Human Potential. But maybe before we get into the book and get into that topic, might give just a little bit of background so people understand the context, where you're coming from, what your background is.
Absolutely. I am a working class, scrappy kid from Philadelphia and went into initially, my journey, it was into corporate America. And 28 years ago, I left corporate America and started the firm Aspire. And I was really actually trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was really aspiring to my next chapter and decided, I want to do the things I love. And so awakening human potential, helping people really strategically understand where organizations can go was like in my soul. It's like the thing I love to do. It's not work. And, I have attention deficit, John. So for me to do anything for 28 years is a bloody miracle. But that's really, what has inspired me all these years, and why the RCI Institute, which studies human behavior, has complemented Aspire, which actually is the execution arm of how do you shift human behavior.
Interesting. I'm actually heading to your home city next Monday. I'm heading to Philadelphia. Absolutely.
Oh,
So
wow.
to
I
do
was
to
just
do some
there.
work. Well, yeah. Well, I spent quite a bit of time there. One of the things that really attracted me to having this conversation with you about the book HeadTrash was that one of the things that I believe so strongly in is that, if we spoke to our family or our friends or our colleagues the way we speak to ourselves in our heads, then we wouldn't have many family or friends or colleagues who would speak back to us. And it's always fascinated me because, like you, I do a lot of work in corporate world. It's managing that self-thought. It's just not something that is kind of any great attention is brought to or is taught to people as they evolve in their careers. Is that your experience, or am I wrong? Is it actually being taught in organizations? But to my mind, it's not.
No, it's really not. And in our study of how do you improve performance of an individual, there were three things that we really were able to zero in on to simplify how do you really create high performers? And there's mindset, skill set, and process set. And as organizations, we spend a lot of time training people on skills and training people on processes.
Yeah.
But we tell people they have to have the right mindset. But how do you get the right mindset when it's holding you back? It's easy to say, it's hard to do. And really understanding that there are practices that you can do that are very easy so that you can lead more effectively, lead yourself first, and then lead others second.
Yeah, and I think to your point there, I think it's really interesting because it's kind of easy enough to identify if I've got a shortage of skills. It's kind of easy enough to identify if I don't know or have a process, right? But it's not so easy to identify that it's actually my mindset that's getting in my way. And I
Yes.
thought that there's a great quote that you had, and I loved it. I wrote it down. You say the successful people aren't necessarily smarter, happier, or more competent. They're simply better at taking out the trash. Now, I love that line. So how are they better at taking out the trash, as you call it, than others? What do they do to take it out?
Well, there's a variety of things that they do. First and most important, we call the model we utilize is own it, shift it, dump it. And owning it. So, it's a thing we don't all talk about. It's like, things upset us and we try and, stuff it inside and, or we get, quiet about, what's going on in our lives. We have to really own our head trash. And when we own it, it no longer controls us because now we're like just aware of it. Okay, this, I'm feeling negative. I'm afraid. I'm worried. I'm anxious about something. That, those are those nasty voices that are triggered by those emotions because we feel the way we think. I always say F comes before T. I feel the way I think.
Right.
And so once we understand, okay, these are the thoughts, and we all have them, like when you can't sleep at night, John, and you're like, that thing is going right, that tape kicks in, and you just
That ghastly 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so annoying. And so really, once we own it, once we acknowledge it, then we can start to shift out of it. And that's the real skill: is how do you shift?
Yeah. But can I go back once, you say in terms of owning it, I agree that shifting is very difficult, but owning it can also be a challenge to really own it and getting people to actually own it. How do you actually get somebody to own it who sees themselves very often as a victim?
Yes. So, that is such a incredibly important tool for leaders because I usually say, to someone where their mindset is not really, it's not serving them, I will actually say, so take a second and think about, how is your mindset? Is it serving you or is it undermining you?
Mhm.
Is it disserving you? And to help people be aware of their own mindset is really critical. And for ourselves, it's really a habit of ensuring that we are on what we call the connected side of our emotional brain. So in our research and studying, how do you shift human behavior? It starts with, how do you get the mind and the head in the game, the mind in the right space? And so we identified that we have a physical brain that runs our bodies, but we have an emotional brain that runs our life.
Mhm.
And the emotional brain has two sides. It has a connected side and it has a disconnected side. On the connected side is where positivity, joy, the ultimate definition of success, in my opinion, but it's collaboration, creativity. Solutions live on the connected side. Where the disconnected side of our emotional brain, that's where fear and worry and anxiety live, and our head trash, those undermining voices that are sucking our energy and literally robbing us of our potential. When we have a problem and we get stuck in the problem, that tape, it's because we're on the disconnected side. And so when we actually can go, okay, I'm on the disconnected side, how do I shift out of this? Then we can help ourselves really manage that because we're not going to stop the problems and the issues that we face in life. I mean, some of us live with negative people. That you might be in a home that feels disconnected. We might have a child that is really in a troubled space and is overly anxious all the time. And so there are real tools that allow us to shift out of that. So when we understand it from a standpoint of thinking about the brain as having two sides to it, and what we want to do is spend the majority of our time on the connected side of our emotional brain.
And as you were talking there, I was thinking, I mean, because my mind is going through different scenarios and different situations and different people that we all know. And, very often you can actually get somebody started on the journey to be mindful of the inner voice and the inner chatter. But then 2 days later, we're just back to where we started, right? Mm-hmm. And we've just gone back into that loop. What are the things that we can do on a kind of a daily basis, if that's true, right? Well, what are the things that we can do to really help us to sustain it, so it doesn't just become, the gym that you join on the 1st of January, and by the 25th of January you haven't gone after that? How do we actually sustain it so that we can maintain it and build it?
Yes. So I think we want to think about proactive things that we can do. And then the fact of the matter is things happen. Someone cuts us off in traffic and we, react to it, and we're in the disconnected side of our emotional brain. And, all of a sudden we're driving crazy too. So there's the proactive and then the reactive when you're in it. So let's start with the proactive. When we were studying this, we actually interviewed over 1,000 people, and we're asking them, when you are in this connected side of your emotional brain, what are the things that you do? What are the habits the things that decrease your emotional stress? So the reason learning how to dump our head trash is so important is that when we have high levels of emotional stress, we have lots of chaos, lots of noise. And therefore, we take unproductive action, or no action. Where when we learn to decrease our emotional stress, we gain clarity, and clarity helps us have productive action. So when we do things proactively to get to the connected side where we can manage our stress and gain more clarity, we all of a sudden have our own power back. Mm-hmm. So we actually in the book identified there were 29 overwhelmingly, they were the majority of these 1,000+ people. They fell into, unfortunately, data lands where it lands. Like I remember my editor saying, "I need one more." I'm like, well, there's 29. That's how data works. But so some things are, practices like some people jog, they run, and it helps them decrease their emotional, I run, I'm from Philly. I run if you're chasing me. That's when I run, right? Outside of that, there's no running. But I do yoga almost every single day. Also, journaling helps some people. There's other people who garden. Some people, it's as simple as the music we're listening to. Habits that don't serve us. Sometimes it's, we're watching the news late at night or first thing in the morning. I know for myself during COVID, I would watch the news and it would just suck all my energy out of me. I came to realize this is a habit that doesn't serve me. Or, Aspire is a global company. Somewhere, someone had a problem while I was sleeping. And if I wake up and the first thing I do before I get out of bed is read my email, it's going to throw me into my disconnected side of my emotional brain. So to really look at what are the habits that I can put in place that serve me for myself. I get up, I meditate, I journal, and I do my yoga. They are the things that work for me each morning. Now, and I'm not really a journaler. We can come back to that in a moment. But when you have these practices that get you where you're in a habit of deciding you're going to be in the connected side of your emotional brain, then all of a sudden these other habits that don't serve you. So do I have to look at my email? Yes. And, after I've gotten my morning routine done, and it's about 8 o'clock for me, so I've been up for a couple hours, I've gotten myself, I'm in my power space, I open up my email and I start dealing with the issues that come up, but I'm dealing with them from the connected side, which is where I can think and I can solve, versus the disconnected side where I I get annoyed and I'm like, I can't believe someone did that. And, I react to it and I start sending out emails I wish I hadn't. Worse yet, I call someone and throw them as a leader in the disconnected side of their emotional brain.
Right.
So that's the power of learning, these habits for ourselves of how do we decrease our own emotional, stress, because as leaders, we are the ripple.
Yeah.
And so, we can get away with it sometimes, but we don't want to get away with it. I tell my team all the time, if I'm in the disconnected side of my emotional brain, please flag it for me. Like say, hey, Renie, that's not, I don't think that's going to serve you. And, even if I get annoyed, I'm going to hear it. Like it might not serve me, but, I'm mad. Okay, you're mad. I get it. And I think that's where the big shift muscle comes in. And the shift muscle, there's a couple of them we can go through, John, but the biggest one is about the questions. The quality of our life is really defined about the questions we ask.
Yeah. One of the things that I read is, and kind of you're kind of referencing it there in some ways, is that you talk about that in many, many ways when we have this negative chatter going on, we kind of build the case for our own negative chatter. I mean, it's kind of, if I'm overweight and I want to go to the gym, well, I'm overweight, but I don't have the energy to go and get the gear and I'm embarrassed to go. So, well, then I won't do it because then I'll be shamed. And you just go on and you just layer upon layer upon layer to rationalize the behavior or the thought process. How do you actually catch that and turn it around? Because it's kind of so not self-serving. How do you catch it and just catch yourself and say, okay, hang on a second, this thought isn't serving. I'm now going to you kind of flip it over. It's easy to say for me to say that, but how do you do it?
Right. Yeah. So, well, first of all, let's just take, I'm going to lose weight or I'm going to go to the gym. So there's a couple of thoughts on that because I am guilty as charged on going to the gym. Like, I don't particularly love going to the gym. So the first thing is, it's really, why do you want to lose weight? A lot of times we focus on what. So, well, what we're going to do about that, well, some people might be better off hiking and other people might be better off jogging. If you said to me, Renie, you have to jog every day to lose weight, it really wouldn't matter, why I wanted to lose weight or get healthy. I think that first we have to understand what is our motivation behind doing something. It reminds me when my father, years ago, he's since passed, but years ago, he was a cigarette smoker. And of course he knew he needed to quit. And my mom begged him to quit. And us kids, he lied about his cigarette smoking, but we would find his cigarettes. I was guilty as charged. I would find them and then I would rip them up and stick them in the trash can. So when he took the trash out, he could see that someone had gotten his, and what was he going to do? Like he couldn't go and like, I was afraid for him. I didn't want him to die of lung cancer, which ultimately he did. But long before that actually happened, when he had a heart attack, he uncovered the why of why he wanted to quit because nicotine is an addiction. It's easy to say you should. It's easy to understand why you should. But his real motivation came when he thought he was dying from this heart attack and he realized, I have this beautiful family. I want to spend more time with them, et cetera, et cetera. And that opened him up. So when we understand what the motivation of things are, like, why do I really want to be a great leader? Or, what is it that, with my family or my friends that I want to do or contribute? So being aware of what matters to us really is key to shifting our behavior. But we also have to look at our habits. There's a great book, Atomic Habits. I love this book.
Yeah.
And because it helps you have a new habit in a realistic approach.
Yeah.
So like for me, if I say I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lift weights because I know that I'm supposed to do that. I'm supposed to build muscle mass, but nothing about that inspires me. But once I start going, okay, well, why? Well, because as you age, it becomes, you're stronger. I do care a lot about health personally, so I can trigger that. But I also then start to make the habit, and I don't give myself the habit that I'm going to go 7 days a week. at first I just go 1 day a week, or I bought the weights and I did it at home. I found what worked for me. But I really think that when we look at helping ourselves change our habits or helping ourselves with our own head trash, it's looking at the quality of the questions we're asking. So if we have head trash about a situation in our work and we ask a question like, why did this happen? We are actually putting ourselves in the disconnected side of our emotional brain. Why did this happen? Who did this? Right? It keeps us stuck in the problem. Where if we change the question, we will shift. So what's the first thing I can do to improve this situation? How can I help this person get to the next step of correcting this problem? Or my favorite question as a leader and as a human, quite frankly, is who do I want to be right now? So when I'm annoyed with a situation, whether it's someone driving too slowly or, I always get annoyed, I shouldn't say always, but I laugh at it now. When this person's in, the checkout line of the grocery store, John, and they don't get their credit card out. And I think it's coming. Like, why 10 people behind you? Why can't you just get your darn credit card out and move this process along? And when I ask myself the question, who do I want to be right now? It immediately decreases my emotional stress because I'm like, well, I don't want to be the crazy woman on a broom. That's for darn sure,
I love that because actually, I'm looking at on my wall. I've got a thing that says, "Who do I want to be?" I love that question because it's a fantastic question. I also love. I think in Atomic Habits, James Clear said that the heaviest weight in the gym is the door.
Yeah,
right.
My gosh, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
that
it
is so brilliant.
Can I talk about you talk about leadership, and I think that it's really interesting when you talk about you talk about teams, because teams create their own big lies, right? We cannot do this because we're not empowered. The organization is this way. How do you get teams in organizations to shift? And one of the reasons that I ask was because very often people say, if I'm working with companies, they say, well, and it's a huge global organization. Well, the culture of the organization is this way, so our team can't be any different, right? And my point is, no, you can actually change your own world, right? Even within that. But I'm just curious about, from your work with teams, when it's a collective team limiting belief or inner chatter that doesn't serve them, how do you get the team to shift?
Well, I think there's a number of ways. Part of why you do a SWOT, in an organization, is to own it, to own your stuff. Part of why you review your financials and you do the analytics of your market share. Head trash and all this isn't fluffy. This is about how do you shift, because when you're stuck, your organization, they'll move, but it'll probably be in the wrong direction, or it won't be aligned. So there'll be lots of, undercurrents that are holding you back. And so part of why, when we look at the tools we utilize to help each other understand where the organization is at, where we are competitively, where we are with our clients, what our clients are saying to us, that's about owning the problems. Mm-hmm. When we own the problems, I believe that the best leaders start with great questions. So what do you think? One of my favorite questions when I'm working on strategic issues is, what do you believe the core problem is with blank? So you have this data or you have this feedback and you fill in that blank. So what's the core problem here? When you think about the core problem, what are the ancillary effects of that problem? And so now you're creating dialogue. What happens is when we're in monologue, we don't create buy-in. And so great leaders understand how to ask really fantastic questions because they help us own it without being defensive about it, without the cover-up. And so that's really why a great leader also has to understand how to manage their own head trash. Because if I come at my team and say, why haven't we been meeting budget? What is going on here? Why is our productivity down? Why is this client unhappy with us? Versus, let's talk about this client and understand what needs to happen for us to improve our performance from their perspective. That's a whole different question than Why is this client unhappy? One keeps everyone stuck and defensive. The other shifts them into the connected side where they can think proactively about what are the solutions here. And this is where the real muscle of a leader is. It's unbelievable when I watch and coach people who are utilizing powerful questions that really what we call are shift questions.
Right.
There's stuck questions and shift questions. And if you go to my website, I have a website called Powered by Renie. And in there, there's all kinds of free resources. And if you just go to the resources, you click on it, and there's a list of shift questions, and there's a list of stuck questions,
Right.
so that you can become aware of what happens is we're in a strategy session or we're in a staff meeting, and we throw everyone into the disconnected side of their emotional brain where we get no productivity. All we create is more chaos.
In your book, HeadTrash, one of the things that you say, and I just want to kind of go back, you say actually, and I hope I've got this right, but you say that the differentiator between a mediocre performer and a high performer is mindset. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So what research have you done just to validate that statement? Because that's a really powerful statement to make. And by the way, I agree with it. But I'm just wondering, in terms, because I know you do so much research, what is the research that has demonstrated that to you?
Yeah. So our research, by the way, is with real human beings. It's like it's with teams. It's, we've worked with thousands of organizations over the last 28 years. So in terms of data points, when you think of mediocrity, and one of the things that we've uncovered is that on the average team, there are 4 levels of performance. There's the outstanding performer, which is in the top 4%. Then there's the top-notch performer, which is about 17% in the average organization. And the challenge organizations and leaders have is that the mediocre crowd is 72%. And so it's a big group. So when we study this mediocrity, and remember, this is about performance. It's not like DISC or, human, it's just strictly on performance. So if you think about the mediocre crowd, then that's why we identified we started our conversation with, which is called the competency model, that for someone to be highly competent, so outstanding and top notch, they're your A performers. And then you have your mediocre crowd. The problem with mediocrity is that it's not consistent. So you have your outstanding performer has tapped into their passion. They're like, rhinoceroses. They're charging forward. Sometimes they can be disruptive even because they're just so focused. Then you have top notch. They've got lots of, they're great learners. They're constantly moving forward. You can count on them. They're always going to deliver. Easy to coach. The mediocre crowd is where your real opportunity is. And so we identified, well, what would allow a person to move up? And that's where that competency model, mindset, skill set, process set. But what we tell people is that it's not worth, and we're a training organization, where you have people that you haven't focused on mindset first, it's not worth teaching people skills and processes. That's why onboarding is so important, because you help people get into the mindset that you want. If they start and it's chaotic or they feel undervalued and worried, then you're throwing them in the disconnected side in the first week. It's like, oh my gosh, you spent all this money to bring someone on, and their head isn't in the right space to support your culture. So this is why mindset becomes so critical to helping move people up what we call the performance model. And when they move up, you start with, this is in our organization, the mindset that we have, and I'll just say for Aspire, is an all-in mindset. And so what does that mean to you? When I say all in, what does that mean to you? And I create the dialogue, and I help guide them so that now they know the expectation. Or if I'm having a problem with someone, I might say, so I want to talk a little bit about how you see yourself and how you're participating with other people. Again, the power of leadership, in our opinion, through all these, endless hours of studying human behavior, is in the questions we ask. So telling someone, for anybody who has children, telling someone, I don't like your attitude, does nothing. It actually throws them in the disconnected side, and they go, what's wrong with my attitude? And you're like, well, that is wrong with your attitude. And they're like, well, what is that? There's no way out. But when we can help people see, So I noticed in this meeting that you were, it seemed like you were struggling to get your point across. Was that frustrating for you? Yeah, people were really annoying to me. Yes. Okay. Well, what do you think that annoyance does in your conversation? Now, all of a sudden, I can start to see myself in the problem. And then when you literally show people the emotional brain and the disconnected side versus the connected side, you can, and it's all there in the book, or actually it's also, you can easily grab it on the website.
Yeah.
When it's there, now all of a sudden people visually go, oh, I was in a meeting just yesterday and I was speaking to a dynamic entrepreneur, and she's about to launch 2 or 3 additional companies, and she's all over the place and she's not comfortable. And we went through and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm in the disconnected side. I can't do anything. I got to get over here. And okay, now I can. So now all of a sudden, it wasn't like me sitting there saying, look, you're about to launch 3 companies and they're going to tank.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't take a brain surgeon. You don't need to be brilliant to understand. You're driving down a highway that isn't going to take you anywhere. Yeah. But once you become aware of it, now all of a sudden the questions were, so let's talk about the company that has the most value to you. Question. Okay. So what are the gaps in this launch? Okay. It's this, this, and this. What realistically now, how can you plan out to close those gaps? So now I can move, but I couldn't ask those questions until I started to help her understand that you're in total chaos and your organization will likely implode.
Yeah. Can I bring you back? Because you really sparked something that I thought was really interesting what you were saying. You were talking about onboarding, right? Which is, I think there's not enough attention paid to onboarding because it's the first impression that people have of the organization when they move into it. But it's interesting, isn't it? If you think about the onboarding programs that we all see, it's about the knowledge, the product, and it's about the process, right? I don't think I've seen onboarding actually talks about the mindset.
Well, when we talk about culture, we are kind of talking about mindset.
Sure.
Where the gap is, John, and I agree with you, the gap is we don't ask questions like, so how do you see yourself in this culture?
Yeah.
So, because not everyone is like, I've got energy coming out of every pore in my body.
Yeah.
Well, that's not, we don't need to hire people. Like, people can be, it's enthusiastic, and people can be equally as talented and have more of a level energy. Right? It doesn't, it's not, it's how they see things, how they participate is what's important. And so when we ask a question in the onboarding process, and I agree with you 100%, onboarding is important and it's not considered urgent.
No.
That's why it gets lost, because urgent is we need to get someone out there to, be in front of the customer. But we haven't gotten them ready for showtime. So when we do that, we actually throw them in the disconnected side of their emotional brain. And even if every day in our stand-up meetings, or when we're in our meetings, or, talking to our line teams, that if we just ask, who do you want to be today? How do you want to serve our customers today? What do you want people to say about your approach to solving their problems? When we start asking those kinds of questions, or when we're onboarding, we ask a question like, so how is your job? How do you see your job important to really living our culture that I just shared? Now it's a different question. Yeah. But what happens on onboarding is we throw up a whole bunch of information all over people, blah, blah, blah. It tends to be a monologue. And so now they don't have it's not in them. And that's why our mindset gaps out.
Yeah. And we expect people to, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant, because I find that what you're talking about terribly interesting, because I think that when you actually think about the whole concept of mindset, it's so important. And for people listening to you today, and people say, okay, I know that I go into that disconnect. I know that I listen to this chatter, and I know I do that. What, somebody listening who's kind of in that, what can they do today after they've listened to this podcast? From your advice, what would you say to them to do to start shifting it?
Okay. Fantastic question. And it is a morning ritual. And and for years, I had 5 questions I used to ask myself every single morning and to put myself in the connected side. And actually, we talked about journaling. There's a joy journal that goes with HeadTrash. It's called the Joy Journal. And it's these 5 questions, but I'm going to give you the 5 questions. There's not even, you fill in the date. So, because I don't want guilt. Like when I miss a day, like I don't want to have to, and even though I'm a writer, I'm not a journaler. So these questions prompt me to get me to own it and shift it and make sure that I'm ready for my day, so that I am decreasing my emotional stress, gaining clarity for my day, so I'm productive when I hit it. So the first question is, what is my word of the day? And so like today, my word of the day is inspire, because I'm spending time with you. I have a speech at 11 o'clock today. So I have a keynote. So there's my job today, my output today is about inspiring. Yesterday, I was doing a lot of coaching and it was with new people. And so my word of the day was listen. Just listen. The day before that, it was productive, because I had just come back from my brother got married in 5 days and I hadn't really worked very much and I needed to get productive. So every Sunday for me is love. So any word does it, but it has to be a word that provides you intention. Mm-hmm. The second question is, what head trash do I need to dump from yesterday? And this is really important because it helps us own it. It's like, I really need to dump the fact that someone shared something with me that feels like it's reflective. This did happen. I wrote this morning. It feels like it's reflective of me, but it's really not, but it's really ticking me off. And, it's just it's just like, even though it has nothing to do with me, it's like, I'm annoyed with it. Right. So I just get it out. I don't have to do anything with it. The third question is, what went well yesterday? Now think about that emotional brain. What went well yesterday? What is it doing? Shifting me to the connected side. Yeah. Right. So now I can go back and I can say, well, what went well? I really was able to, understand other people, these new businesses that were coming in. I was able to get everything done. I had a chapter due for a book for someone else. I had too many things on that list. I took 5 days off and I overcommitted. There's some head trash too. Like, why did you do that is not the right question. It's what will you do to get out of this mess? That's a good question. But anyway, so I really focused on what I was able to accomplish. The fourth question to ask every single morning is, what is most important for me to get done today? And I write down those big things that I need to get done today. And generally speaking, it's 3 or 4. There's not a lot of room in this book. I can't write down 4,000 things, And then, so I really zero in on what matters most today. And sometimes it's really making sure that my family knows how much I love them. Like, it doesn't just have to be work. Sometimes it's like I'm feeling disconnected, and maybe that's my head trash. And it's, I have to go clean up with my husband what I said yesterday. Mm-hmm. Like, that's an important thing because I wasn't really very polite about something. I'm a human being. I do and say dumb things. So cleaning it up might be on that list, or, whatever it is. And then the fifth question, which really is critical to being in the connected side. And for me, I define success as how much joy do I have in my life? So where joy comes from is gratitude. And so that question is, what am I grateful for? And I ask that question actually every morning. And then right before I go to bed, when I shut the lights off and say goodnight, I then go, what am I grateful for? Because it puts me in the connected side of my emotional brain. And I keep thinking of what I'm grateful for until I fall asleep, because then that head trash doesn't start creeping in.
I love that. Renie, this has been fantastic, and we could go on, and I've kept you much longer than I said I was going to keep you. 2 questions I ask everybody, but you've already answered one of them, which is your daily ritual. So you've shared that. The second was a book other than your own. Just curious, what book had made an impact upon you?
Okay, well, right now I'm reading Blue Zones, which is so
Oh,
interesting to me because I'm really about health, but health span, not lifespan, health span. And so really looking at how other people live is really intriguing. I also, when I think of that question, I mentioned this book. I think Atomic Habits. I go back to that book all the time because our habits really define the quality of our life along with those questions. And so if we ask questions that don't serve us, then that's a bad habit too. And so I think Atomic Habits is just a fantastic book to help us have the habits that serve us. And that really puts you in the connected side of your emotional brain where joy lives.
absolutely. Well, I agree with you about Atomic Habits. I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely super. Big fan of James Clear. Renie, this has been fantastic. We'll put it in the show notes, but people listening, how can they get in touch with you?
So you can always reach out to me at Renie at poweredbyaspire.com. I'll take your questions, no problem. Also, you can go to poweredbyrenie.com, which has all kinds of resources specifically around HeadTrash. And you can also buy the book through there, Amazon, etc., as well as the Joy Journal.
That's
And then,
fantastic.
of course, follow me on Instagram
Do that.
or LinkedIn.
Renie, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been wonderful. It's been fascinating. It's been fun. And it's been very informative. So thank you.
Thank you, Jana. I so appreciate your time.